So, today we're going to talk about a financial crisis that almost was. We're going to dive deep into what happens, really, moment by moment, when a massive government payment just stops, and what that tiny hiccup reveals about the hidden wiring of our entire global financial system. You know, the heart of this whole thing really comes down to a single powerful idea, a thin thread of trust. It's this almost invisible line between a promise being made and the money actually showing up. And that thread, it holds our entire economic world together. So when it gets stretched, believe me, the whole system feels it. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll look at the initial shock, how the system reacted, the ripple effect on the real economy, the very real human cost, and then how it all gets put back together. And finally, what we can learn from it all.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning. This whole thing didn't kick off with some big explosion. Nope, it started with a quiet, unsettling pause. A single moment that showed just how much our system runs on simple, everyday promises being kept.
The first hint that something was wrong was incredibly subtle. We're not talking about alarm bells or flashing red lights. It was a pending status that just wouldn't go away. It was the hushed tones on a conference call. It was a tiny, unnatural blip on a financial chart. It just goes to show you, instability in these massive systems, it doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a whisper.
So, how did the system itself react? Well, when that first shockwave hit, the big financial institutions didn't just panic. Instead, they fell back on these deeply rehearsed plans, protocols designed specifically to manage and contain a situation just like this.
Instantly, it's like a defensive playbook gets activated. The focus shifts to the absolute essentials. Get your hands on available cash, double check who you're doing business with, and, this is key, control the story. These calm scripts and the obsession with documenting everything, it's all about stopping fear from spiraling into a full-blown panic. A really important tool in this playbook is something called a collateral haircut. The best way to think about it is like an insurance policy. When you lend money against an asset, you ask for a little extra cushion, just in case. Well, during a crisis, the risk factor goes way up, so that cushion, the haircut, gets a whole lot bigger. And you can see that idea right here. On a normal day, the safety cushion is pretty small, but as soon as that uncertainty spikes, the system demands a much, much thicker cushion. And what does that do? It makes borrowing more expensive and basically puts the brakes on the entire financial machine. Now this is such a crucial point. Financial firms are constantly running fire drills for events exactly like this one. But here's the thing. Practicing for a crisis is one thing. Actually performing when the pressure is on and the stakes are real, that is a whole different ballgame.
Of course, this financial tremor wasn't just stuck on Wall Street. Not at all. It quickly rippled outward and started creating very real problems for small businesses, for people just trying to keep their shelves stocked and pay their bills.
And here's exactly how that chain reaction works. A big government payment gets delayed. That makes suppliers nervous, so they start tightening their credit terms, adding little clauses that let them change the rules whenever they want. And that puts immediate, intense pressure on a small business's cash flow and its ability to get inventory. For business owners like this, everyday finance isn't abstract. It's about relationships, invoices, credit lines. They're described here as little bridges made of trust. And that's the exact same trust that was being put to the test at the very highest levels of the global economy. But this isn't just about the mechanics of finance and supply chains, right? There's a profound psychological cost when the system gets this shaky. It kind of messes with our fundamental sense of order and predictability in the world. This one sentence, it just perfectly captures the feeling. For most people, it's not about running through the streets panicking. It's this deep, unsettling discomfort when the basic, boring rhythms of life, like knowing your pension check is going to arrive on time, suddenly get disrupted. It's a hiccup in the system, and it feels wrong. And in response to that feeling, what do people do? They seek out something tangible, something real. The decision to pull out a small envelope of cash, that's not about someone thinking the whole banking system is going to collapse. It's a psychological need to hold something solid in your hands when the abstract systems we rely on feel a little wobbly.
And it's funny, just as the big institutions have their calm scripts, regular people create their own versions. We instinctively fight back against that systemic chaos with little personal acts of order. Making a to-do list, sharing some food with a neighbor, just checking in on each other. These are all ways of taking back control and strengthening community bonds when the big picture feels chaotic.
So, how does a system like this pull back from the edge? Let's dig into the actual repair process. And it's not some dramatic flip of a switch fix. It's a careful, deliberate, step-by-step return to normal. The recovery follows a very specific sequence. First, the payment finally goes through. Then, the systems start grinding through the backlog, and they clear the oldest stuff first to restore a sense of order. Only after that do things like those collateral requirements, the risk cushions, start to relax a bit. And trust? Well, trust comes back much, much more slowly. As the saying goes, it arrives on foot. This perspective is just absolutely critical to managing a crisis. It's all about reframing the problem. If you see the situation as a process that is simply unfinished, instead of a system that is fundamentally broken, it allows you to stay calm, follow the plan, and guide everything back to health without caving to panic. It's a huge mental shift. So, after all that, what are the big takeaways from this near miss? What does an event like this teach us about building a stronger, more resilient system? Well, the lessons are actually pretty fundamental. They're all about simple core principles. You might expect some incredibly complex answer, but the advice for preventing the next crisis really boils down to what one person in the story calls kindergarten rules. 1, have a bigger cushion than you think you need. 2, keep your records perfectly clean and organized. And 3, make sure your people are expertly trained. It's all about mastering the basics over and over again. So I think the core lesson here is that a truly stable system isn't just about fancy software or corporate protocols. It's a hybrid. It relies just as much on the thousands of small, human decisions that people make every day. Decisions to stay organized, to act with kindness, and to support their communities. Both sides are essential. In the end, the system survived, but it was changed by what happened. That thin thread of trust, it now has a knot in it. A scar that serves as a memory of the time it was stretched almost to its breaking point. But a knot isn't a flaw, it's history. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. As we face all the new challenges of today, what kind of history, what new knots are we weaving into that thread right now?